Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello and welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today I have with me Andy Stevens. How are you, Andy?
Hi, Matt. I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Andy, as always, there's still people in the world who doesn't know who you are. So would you mind doing a little bit of a presentation of yourself and letting the world know who you are and how you make your marks in the world?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'd be surprised if a lot of people did know who I am. They might be more familiar with my business partner and co-founder of 3 companies, Kyle Roof, an SEO master. And I've been working with him for the past 6 years to create a SEO consulting firm, which is now 6 years old. And since then, an SEO SaaS tool called Page Optimizer Pro. And lately, our new venture is also with another co-founder, Ted Kupitis, and that's called Internet Marketing Gold, which is an SEO community and training platform. So that's what's kept me busy for the last 6 years. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So so you're also addicted to building cool businesses then?
I get dragged into it, I would say.
You get dragged into it. Okay, fair enough. Can happen too.
But it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Andy, the way I normally kick these off is obviously with this magical question: how do you look at management, and how do you what's your management philosophy? So, any awesome inputs on that one from your side?
I guess what I've learned over the last, I've been running businesses myself for about 8 years, starting off with just myself as running a freelance agency. But before then, running other people's businesses, also in SEO. So I've never really left the SEO industry, which is pretty sad. My thing has always been around creating systems and processes. So I've managed to pretty successfully do that with an SEO firm, which has had roughly between 40 and 70 concurrent projects at any one time. And if you know much about SEO, you'll know that there is a lot of moving parts to managing SEO campaigns, from all of the on-page work to running audits to doing an analysis and reporting and off-page and content generation. There is a lot going on. So if you don't have good systems and processes behind that, your business is going to very quickly become an unmanageable mess. So I feel like that's one of the management areas which I've maybe done fairly well at, is getting that into a little bit less chaos to being a bit more kind of organized and structured.
Awesome. What's been the biggest challenge with that? What's really been your biggest challenge with building system and process system?
It's a lot of work, it's very easy just to go about doing things without recording them and creating processes out of them. It's funny when I look into other firms that I see operating, when, for instance, we bring in staff that work for other consulting firms, and I get an insight into how others operate. I see that there seems to be a lot less structure in what they're doing. So, for example, where a campaign manager or a project manager is basically they're working more or less like a professional consultant, where they just build on the number of hours which they work on a project per month, and it's a single resource to one single client. And that's in fact, like, it's very inefficient. And when I started off, I was doing it that way because I didn't have any staff. But not only is it very efficient, but it's not as good in terms of the output because you can't have specialists. No one can be good at everything. So the challenge has been working to build these vertical silo teams which coordinate together to build kind of successful campaigns for our clients, and we can manage them by delivering good results, but also having them be fairly profitable at the same time.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, and you're totally right. I mean, I've worked with a lot of SEO companies, and a lot of them have very little to no structure, and at the same time, exactly as you say, they're all trying to literally bill out hours that someone else is working, and it instead of being like, it kind of works like a recruitment agency. It's like, hey, I know this SEO guy over here who can help you. You know, here's his hourly rate type thing, right? So it's actually like renting out an SEO more than necessarily guaranteeing results. And like, it's always difficult to guarantee any results, right? But at least for me, when I hire an agency of any kind in any business, like, I'm hiring an agency because I expect them to have a process, right? And I totally agree with you. I've seen a lot of SEO companies not have that type of framework and not have that level of expertise, right?
That's right. I mean, if you're hiring a freelancer, it should be for different reasons, and an consulting firm or an agency in SEO shouldn't be operating in the same way.
Yep.
So yeah, totally. we like to be able to offer like a full spectrum of services, but still focusing on SEO, but being able to offer specialists in each of those areas, and but still bring it all together into something that's coherent, where the client doesn't understand the complexity that's going on behind the scenes, because they don't need to, and we don't want them to. It should be a simple matter of them dealing with one person.
Yep.
And not getting like tons of different reports from different places.
Yep. Yeah, and the same with communication, right? Like, you want to have a clear communication strategy and channel and consistent updates so people know what to expect and so on.
Yeah, I imagine you've got a lot to contribute on this as well. I should be interviewing you too, because you're doing a similar thing, but I think even on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, but it's good fun. It's good fun. Okay, so that's good, Andy. So what's sort of the biggest challenge you've had from management standpoint? Like, what's the biggest sort of boo-boo or screw up you've ever made?
There's not like one big screw up that I'm like, oh, remember that time. Yeah. What a big lesson we took from that, unless I'm forgetting something. I mean, there's been times where running search ads campaigns through Google Ads, budgets have been incorrect. And I've seen that happen on a much greater scale than what has happened with us. So we're fortunate. But if you blow out a client's spend budget through mistakes in budgeting, and you end up spending $10,000 in the month instead of $2,000, then like, you're accountable for that. You're responsible for that. And on a couple of occasions it's happened, and it's cost us pretty dearly. And almost catastrophe. I don't know if Kyle wants me to talk about this, but and this
we won't tell anyone. It is just a podcast, right?
I mean, like, when you're starting out, you don't have traction. It's very seldom that you have immediate traction with your business. It grows slowly. It's painful. It's a lot of work and little reward. We're at a phase where we didn't have like amazing growth, and we didn't have great salaries. And Kyle had just had a young son, and he was offered a great opportunity to leave the business and go and work for another business. And he told me that he was really interested in taking that opportunity and basically just shutting down our company. And I very stubbornly just said, no, that's not going to happen. I think there's something here that's too good to let go of and just become an employee working for the man.
Yep.
Don't give up. Like, how can we make this work?
Yep.
So you can maybe still leverage some of this opportunity, but we don't give up on our dreams to have our own company. And so I kind of swallowed my pride a little bit with that one, and just said, Kai, like, how can we still make this work? And we worked out a way to do it. So funny, but he moved into their offices. He took the job that he was offered, moved across the country 2 states, set up his family, took the job, and was working from their offices on the agreement that he would be half working for them and half working for us, but from their offices. And they were fine with that. 3 months later, that whole thing just fell in a heap. And he would have otherwise, he would have lost his job and he would have moved across the country for no reason. But by that stage, we'd built up some other client relationships and things were going a bit stronger. And so he had our company to fall back on. So I think the lesson from that was that partnerships are, I think, like, the rule of synergy. You can create more when you work together than you can ever by yourself. But they're not always easy, and you can't always have your own way. Sometimes you have to cop it a little bit for the sake of the company's success, which comes first.
I like that. I love that lesson. And then I think, most entrepreneurs have been there, right? Like, most entrepreneurs have been in this shit situation, where you're counting pennies and you're like, is this the right choice? And, am I doing the right thing right now? Or should I just give up and, jump ship? And like, most entrepreneurs I know have been there, right? And a lot of people are still there. Like, one of these things, and one of the reasons I love talking about failure is because a lot of people pretend it's not there, even when they're sitting on the edge, right? Like, so many people, particularly in the online sort of business world, they're like, oh yeah, business is amazing. And, every time they talk with a friend, like, life is the best in the world. But if you actually go look at their finances, if you go look at their business, things are often not that way. And I think it's a little bit of a shame to a large extent, because I think if people were better at talking about their struggles, they would actually survive much better. Because one of the key things is that people always feel like they're the only one in the situation. They're always like, oh, everyone got their shit together and I'm just failing over here, like, I should give up. But if they actually knew how many people are struggling and how many people are failing, I think business would actually be a lot easier for a lot of people. So,
yeah. Man, there's absolutely no shame in it either. The grit that you have to withstand to go through long, hard times is what makes you an entrepreneur in terms of mindset anyway. And it's something more that you should be proud of, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah. I thought of another one, actually. This is one that I should have thought of. Since you've brought up how interested you are in fuck-ups. And so this is a more recent one where we invested a ton of money in building a platform, so software. And everybody I spoke to was like, this is a bad idea. And we ignored them all because we just didn't actually have any better solution. And the problem was, which this is a lesson I've learned, the technology was not our core offering. We were building the technology to support our core offering, which was content and education. And that was a total failure because the technology we were never going to invest as much as what it needed to make it good for our customers. simply because this software only had one customer, which was us. And in today's software industry, people just have such high expectations, and there's so many amazing companies out there who all they do is build a type of software for one function. It's ridiculously over ambitious and egoistic to think that you can build something that can compete. So we spent more than 6 months and tens of thousands, I don't even want to say the number, building something which we've now just completely decommissioned and found a much better off-the-shelf solution, which was just mildly customizable.
That it sounds a little bit like IMG.
Thanks for mentioning that, Mads. I wasn't going to, but
not to pull you out, but it sounds a little bit like IMG. But that sounds it happens to everyone, and we've been there. I mean, I've been there a couple of times, definitely. So it was
an expensive but a good lesson to learn, and it does have a happy ending. Like, we're in a much better position now because we found a solution finally. It's better to invest that time in searching for really good solutions than to go and try and build it yourself.
Yeah, that I mean, I've dabbled in software at least a couple of times, and one of the key challenges, particularly when you're not a developer and have no developer brains and stuff, is it becomes very quickly very expensive, and you definitely have you have to be very, very damn clear about what you're doing, what you're trying to solve, and be very clear if there's anything that can remotely support your needs elsewhere, because it is so much easier to work with and customize something a little bit than it is to build something totally from scratch. Right?
Oh yeah. And just being able to reach out to other people and rely on their technical support and development team if there's a problem, rather than other people coming to you saying this doesn't work, and in that case, like, the buck stops with you, that you've got to fix the problem. And sometimes you don't even know where to start by fixing that problem, or it opens a can of worms of much bigger problems. Handing that over to another, like a third party, is what you pay these monthly license fees for, and they're very, very cost effective in terms of the value you get from it.
Yeah. So why does people like working with you guys? Like, so your employees specifically, why do they love working for you guys?
Who's to say they love working for us?
I made a crazy assumption right there.
Well, we've got a really low rate of staff attrition, to be honest. Like, we had to lay off one guy who'd been working with us for 6 years a few months ago. And the one that he started with also 6 years ago is now our CTO. And barely anyone who we've wanted to keep during that time has actually left. So probably we're a bit lucky and fortunate, but I guess it must be more than that, because I've had like a number of emails from people over the years who work for us saying that they've really enjoyed working for me specifically, and Kyle, of course, but these emails have been directed to me. And basically, I think it comes down to nurturing. I just have that in my personality, that I do take on a responsibility when I hire someone to make sure that their needs are being met, and to find out what those needs actually are, and to actually check in with people. Like, we're not large enough where I'm not able to do that. So even if I'm not working with everyone directly, I still get the chance from time to time to check in with them and just see how they're going. We have a number of different kind of programs. So at least once a year, we have a retreat where we bring the team away, because most people are working. They're not in the same office on a day-to-day basis. We do have offices, but most people are in there like every day. So bringing everyone together and doing social team building kind of things. But I know that's not really that out of the ordinary. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't 100% know the answer to that. I'd have to dig really deep and get some feedback from.
I think you definitely mentioned a couple of them, right? Like I think the reason why I ask particularly you is because I know like a lot of agencies really struggles with retention, right? They really struggle to retain people, and as soon as people are good enough, they leave and they start their own thing and all this sort of stuff. Whereas I see like for me, it comes down to exactly very good people management, right? And I think reality is most SEOs aren't necessarily great. I call it people, and that sounds weird, but they're not necessarily, like, most SEOs are not necessarily people persons, if you will, and they're not necessarily, they're not very good at building relationship. They're not very good at like necessarily caring about other people as much, because it's just the personality just isn't there. And obviously I've known you for a while, and I know your personality is different. So that's why I was very keen to ask that question. But
right, okay.
I'm really I'm a big fan of great management, obviously, and I really, particularly what you said about building that relationship, checking in with people, right? That's one of the biggest things that I like constantly hammering with clients, like, have consistent like one-to-one sessions, and make sure you're actually communicating with people like human beings on a frequent basis, because it does make such a difference for people. And
yeah, well, I have said to people on occasion that they might think as though I'm the boss, but that's not necessarily the way that I frame it. And this might sound really corny, but in many ways, I see that they are actually the boss, and it's my job to ensure that they stay happy in order to produce their best work and to stay on with us and not go and find other opportunities. Like in that way, I'm kind of working for them to make sure that their needs are being met, and I don't take that lightly.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because realistically, and a lot of SEOs doesn't like hearing this thing, but realistically, a lot of SEOs are actually happier working for the people. Like, a lot of SEOs are really sort of detail oriented. They really like processes. They really like frameworks. A lot of SEOs really like having like a structured workday, right, as part of the personality, because that is part of very detail-oriented people's personality. But again, like in the SEO world, you have this sort of, oh, you should have your own business, you should do this, you should do this. But realistically, a lot of people would actually be happier working with or working for the people. And I think, again, like it's I think it's a benefit with companies that actually do management well and are able to keep SEOs that are really happy, because I think for a lot of SEOs that's really a great spot to be in. Like, they can do their best work, they can do amazing things, and they can provide significant value as long as they're being taken well care of, and as long as people treat them in the right way, right?
Yeah. I've seen over the years enough people in the industry to break them down into two main categories. And apologies for going too much into the SEO industry, because I know that's what we're in, but not necessarily what all the viewers are in, or the listeners. But there's two basic types of people that come into this industry that most people fall into. And One of them is the one you kind of described, fairly technical oriented, usually more introverted personality types, like detail, like processes, and like being left alone to basically do their work. They don't like having to upsell. They even don't always like getting on the phone with clients. But if you set out a process for them to follow, and give them a little bit of creative leeway, they'll do a really good job. Then there's the entrepreneurial SEOs who often don't have a great passion for the tech, but they've come from a sales background, and they see the opportunity to build a business really fast through selling something and delivering maybe something else, if that makes sense. Overselling, under-delivering. And usually, like with SEO companies, you see the ones that have just been ticking along for many years, and are doing fine but don't have strong growth. And they come from the former personality type, generally, with the owners and the employees. And then you see the super fast growth ones, which may succeed and may fall in a heap after a year.
Yep.
And they're more like the latter personality type. So you can generally put people from our industry into one of those categories. It would be good if we could just have more of a balance of people in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is like the thing about SEO is it's so detailed, right? Like it really does significantly appeal to people who are so super detail oriented, right? Because there is, like exactly as you said in the beginning, there's so many moving parts, there's so many details, and there's so much stuff to keep up to date on, right? And it just appeals to certain types of personalities for sure. So yeah,
indeed.
No, that's good. That's good. Very interesting to hear. Very interesting to hear. And I think I think a lot of people can learn from this, right? Because I think a lot of the time when you're seeing people in the industry recruit, I find it really interesting, like how many people struggle significantly with recruitment, and how many people find it pretty straightforward. Like it's either people are really good at it, or else it's like the biggest struggle on planet Earth. And I think personally, I really continue to see that the biggest struggle for people is really this management aspect. And exactly as you said earlier, like a lot of these guys, they like to be left alone. You know, they like to be given responsibility. They will deliver, and you know, they like making stuff happen, but they don't like the client calls. They don't like all of these things. And honestly, it's a little bit like when I work with sales teams, because in sales team, you have the total opposite dynamic, right? Where for sales teams, like the people, they love going out talking to clients, they love talking to customers, they love building relationship and talking to people, but they hate doing all the admin, right? So in some of the sales organizations I've worked with, we've gone the other way around, and we've basically said, you know, like instead of getting these high-paid salespeople to sit and do crappy admin stuff, like, you know, get them an easy way. Like, for example, if they're driving around the country talking to people, like give them an easy way to sit and talk into a phone or talk into whatever, where they can tell someone else what to do, and someone else who likes admin can actually sit and do that in the background, right? And that have generated a lot of benefit from some of these sales companies, because again, it's the happiness of those really, really amazing salespeople. If they love working there, if they love doing a job where they can just sell and someone else takes care of all the, let's call it, boring stuff they don't like doing, like that increases their happiness. And it's just the different things, but it's exactly the same type of mindset as it sounds like you're using in the SEO world, right?
Absolutely. Actually, we're going through exactly what you just said at the moment with our own sales resource. Excellent. Just making sure that they are doing what they're super good at doing, and that they don't have all these distractions from administration, and like especially with lead gen, some companies would like their sales guys to be doing lead gen. And we're working with a sales coach, John Logar, at the moment. You know him.
Yep.
He's fantastic. And he kind of taught us a bunch of things about this, that should be just such a single-minded job.
Yeah.
Without the distractions of administration and any lead generation. It's just like someone else books appointments, they get on the phone.
And the key thing, like I kind of break it down and I look at it like there's both a good point about role speciality, like the skill set to do lead generation is often quite different than the skill set of doing sales. All right. So that's one key point. But the other key point that I'm consistently looking at is like, where do you get this stuff done most cost effectively? And the whole thing is like, you can find a lot of people significantly cheaper and significantly easier to find around that can do really good lead gen. But really good sales is often a much more expensive skill to buy and to have in-house, right? So therefore, if you can get the lead gen done by lesser paid workforce, like you put your company at a significant advantage, right? Because you're basically paying less overall for the lead gen and the sales in total. So that's a lot how I tend to look at it. But yeah, John is amazing from a sales perspective, and you've always got a lot of good inputs.
Yeah. I'd like to know who the lead gen guys are that you're using, because our most highest paid staff member at the moment is probably Google for that exact purpose of lead gen.
I've heard about that guy. Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many different ways to do lead gen, right? But there's so many, like, if you look for most businesses, at least the sort of consistent ways to do lead gen, a lot of staff we work with for clients who do it on LinkedIn, a lot of staff who do it on, like email outreach, and there's a lot of these processes that are very easy to, not necessarily automate the full flow, but automate a part of it and have some great humans sitting in the end of the flow. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, it's not necessarily cheap, but it's often cheaper than very highly skilled and highly paid salespeople. Right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Excellent. What is the future key challenges you have? So obviously your business is doing half decently. What do you see being the key challenges that are coming up for you over the next months and maybe year or years?
Just growing teams, I think. Delegate. So where we can actually remove ourselves from the daily operational runnings of the businesses. It took 5 years with the consulting firm to do that. And I've seen a lot of other businesses do that in much less than half the time. As you kind of have multiple businesses to run, that becomes more and more important as you're just switching hats all the time between not only different roles, but different businesses with different customer bases and so forth. So scaling teams so we can remove ourselves from daily operational duties and get the right people in. I think in the beginning, what's a couple of things that caused this to be so slow, we've identified and potentially solved. One of those being that we had a mentality of we can't afford it. We can't afford to hire the best people. So let's just get inexperienced people who we can hopefully get some talent in there, but we can leverage the fact that no one's going to pay them a very good wage and we're the best opportunity that they're going to get. And we've been lucky in that on quite a few occasions to find good people amongst that bunch, but it's less tried and tested. And the other point was probably also that I probably wasn't comfortable with hiring people who I thought would be better at the job than I was. And I think this is a common like lack of delegation issue that founders come across, is that seems really hard to do and really scary. But once you've done it, it completely changes your life. And
I was about to say your life is about to change.
Yeah, that's right. And just being able to trust in others and take your hands off the wheel is just so empowering, not just for yourself, but for the staff as well. Like, staff love it when they don't feel like you're watching over their backs all the time, and they're being given responsibility to show that they can prove themselves. Not always, but often enough, if you show someone that you're willing to trust them, they'll repay you for that. And it took me far too long to learn that lesson. So in the future, learning from this so we can build and scale teams much faster and efficiently is going to be the key to our growth, so we don't get stuck.
Yeah, I might have a couple of golden nuggets on this one, right? So one of the things, particularly when you start, like a lot of SEO companies, particularly start out like these sort of freelancing businesses, you know, where it's really a person doing SEO and then it's two people doing SEO, and the problem is they're used to being the expert. And they're used to tying their value, and they're basically used to thinking, well, my business is successful because I'm the expert here. And that is often what actually drives this perfection mentality, right? Because they're so used to their business succeeding because they know it all. And they're so used to being the know-it-all that it becomes very strange for them having to let go of responsibilities. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing the most is particularly when you have new things, like a lot of people, exactly as the way you have been building the business originally, a lot of people sort of look at it and say, well, okay, to give something, you know, I need to learn it first. And then when I've learned it, I can build the process. I can tell people what to do, and then I can give it to them. But actually,
That's exactly what I was just about to say.
One of the best learning experiences is actually doing it the other way around and saying, hey, you know, we need to build a new forum, or, you know, we need to start a podcast. Let's give someone the responsibility to do it instead of me or someone in the management team figuring out. Let's give the responsibility to someone else and make them responsible, right? So, because often the biggest cost is not necessarily just handing over a process, but it's actually the learning process. And the problem is, every time you're the expert, you're the person come to and ask questions, which is the very time-consuming part. But the whole point is, if you put yourself in a situation where you're not the expert, then you become the person who people don't go and ask the questions. They go and ask the expert, which is not you, which basically significantly improves your ability to do other things. So actually picking up things in your business, and that can even be within the SEO stuff, right? Like that could be saying, you know, oh, this new schema thing, you know, we don't have anyone who's expert at that. Let's pick someone in the team and let's get them to learn it, and let's get them to be the expert instead of us as donors, right? That is a really, really powerful thing to do. And it's really one of the easiest way to start appreciating delegation in a really effective manner, right?
That's brilliant. Yeah, not only what you mentioned, but by not allowing that to happen, you create a ton of bottlenecks in opportunity for growth, while everything is dependent on you or one or two other senior leaders in the business to first go and learn and do the discovery and systems building before handing it over to someone else. means that you're always going to be, you're always going to have a ton of things that you really want to do, but they're just not getting done. So that's...
And I learned it the hard way. I mean, honestly, I learned it the hard way. I had tied my success in the past when I worked corporate. I tied my success to the fact that I'd gone into a field, I learned to master it, and I was the expert in that field. What I realized was my management career took a huge improvement when I got a job where I wasn't the expert. Like when I moved into a field where I wasn't the know-it-all guy, that was when my results started significantly improve. And it took me a while to actually realize why that happened. But, you know, as soon as I could sort of pinpoint it and I figured out, like, wait a minute, the reason why I'm super successful now is because, you know, I'm not the expert anymore. I have to trust and rely on other people who are the experts. And that means I can actually do what I'm supposed to do, which is the management. And I get this question all the time. How do you get time to do management when you're so busy doing things? I get it all the time, right? And the whole point is, if you're too busy to do other things, to do management, you are doing the wrong things, right?
Yeah, this solves a big mystery that I've had in my mind for ever since I've met you. And I wanted to know how you always seem so relaxed and have so much free time, yet are at the top of a number of successful companies, Mads. And I'm a big fan of Richard Branson, as I know a lot of people are, but he is the master of doing this. He's built 200 companies and still plays tennis and goes kite surfing every morning on his tropical island, you know?
Yep.
How does he do that?
But very much the same thing. And like, again, the challenge, it actually becomes a double challenge in SEO specifically, because again, SEO is this very detail oriented niche, and, you know, people in it, they like being experts. Like, you know, in other business types, what you see a lot of the time is people are happy when they can let go. Like, people are like, oh yeah, now I don't have to do that anymore. But actually a lot of SEOs really freaking enjoy what they're doing. And obviously when you enjoy sitting nerding around and enjoy sitting doing SEO, it obviously doesn't make it easier to let it go, right? But again, that's why I say to a lot of my clients, do you want to be an SEO or do you want to build a business? And by the way, both are okay. If you want to be an SEO, if you want to sit and nerd around, that is totally okay, right? Like, just because the world around you is putting a lot of pressure for you to have big business and stuff, don't fall into that. But you're better making that clear to yourself, because if you're kind of feeling like you are trying to build a big business, but you really want to just sit and nerd around, you know, then you probably struggle building a big agency, right? But that doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that what you should do. And even if you figure out what to do and what not to do, you can still hire people for it. Like, I know very successful businesses where the owner isn't the CEO, the owner is sitting doing whatever he or she likes doing, and they actually have someone doing the CEOing in the company, right? That does happen. And particularly SEO is an industry that's actually really...
Probably a good idea.
It's often a really good idea because there's so many people who just like SEOing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I couldn't have said it better, Maz.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Very
but
good.
also I think on that point, this is a part of growing and scaling as well, is that you don't have all of the answers, you don't have all of the resources at first in your own skills and then in your own team. Hiring consultants to help build out the weak areas of your business is really critical as well. And that doesn't need to be as expensive as it sounds. Again, it's something that we waited far too long before we did it. But yeah, consultants, like professional consultants that are good, they are expensive by the hour, and it might hurt a little bit in the short term, but it usually, if you follow the systems that they put in place, pays off like tenfold once you have those kind of running as part of your machine. And they don't necessarily have to be ongoing resources. They could just come in and you can do a few sessions with them. They can set you up, and then maybe you do like a quarterly check-in. You know, it doesn't have to be a huge cost. And for us, like the areas of sales was definitely that, with neither us having a sales background or really knowing how to do it. So bringing in outside talent for that. It took us probably 2 years to find the right person for that, going to just always looking, but just struggling to find who we thought was the right fit. And also in finances as well. So although we've had a bookkeeper for a long time, they were under my direction, following my instructions, and I'm not particularly financial. So they were only ever going to be as good as the directions which I gave them, and we had no leadership. So bringing in actually someone else from the DC, we started with Ben McAdam to help with building projections, for instance. And that's something that I didn't even know that we were supposed to be doing, and helping to set KPIs. So from, you know, setting projections, you are goal setting where you want to be revenue and profit wise in the future, and then all of the engineering of the or the mechanics of the business can go back from there. So if we want to be at this point in monthly recurring revenue in 6 months or 12 months, what do we have to do to get there? And then that comes down to building the key performance indicators and targets around those month on month. Like this stuff was all new to me, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah, but and that's the challenge for most people. Most people, I call it the game of hope, but most people is kind of sitting around like, yeah, I want to build a great agency. I'm like, what's your plan? Well, I'm gonna do really good and build a big agency. Like that's kind of the plan, right? And you're 100% right. Like it's some of those things that a lot of people don't look at it because again, they don't have the background. They don't know that that's a great way to do it, right? And again, that's not necessarily a way to do things, but there's definitely a lot of methods that are trial and tested and works well, right? And yeah, financial planning, business planning, and so on it's often overlooked big time, but particularly when you're growing, it's really important because you see so many companies that, you know, suddenly they hire a sales guy and sales explode, but because they hadn't expected it, they don't actually have the fulfillment. They don't have the ability to fulfill because, you know, that came unexpected. They hadn't planned it. And those are the things, like when you go down and do really good planning, that is effectively what enables huge business growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's, I mean, even for myself, like I have a lot of sort of financial understanding and background, but I've also worked like a lot with Rob Tabraka, who's also a very, very good when it comes to all the financial planning and so on, right? And it's nice to be able to just turn things around and even from someone who's experienced with it, like just have that external input can be hugely beneficial, right?
Yeah. And when you transform from being in the business to working on the business, you need to have this stuff in order, because otherwise you've stepped back from what's going on at a daily level, and you won't have the transparency to know when things are not going right. So if you look at a business like it's a big machine with lots of moving parts, all the parts have to be moving together in order for that business to be healthy. So you need to be at a high level at least, and frequently keeping up to date on what those health metrics are, and making sure that if some start to dip, that they're put back on track so everything else doesn't fail underneath. It's kind of a self-audit that you do on your business, which covers both like the driving growth businesses and the enabling growth businesses. And it goes into 6 business elements: marketing, sales, product, people, finances, and process, I think, at once. And you kind of measure your strengths in these and you can see whereabouts, what type of business you are. And a driving growth business is one that is more like sales oriented, but less process and system oriented, and tends to grow fast, but can also fail fast.
Yeah.
And an enabling growth business is one that has more organic growth. They have a lot of systems in place. They run a lot more conservatively, but they just don't have the scaling opportunity. And when we did this, like a year ago, I could see that we were very strong in enabling growth, but pretty weak in the driving growth, which is marketing, sales, and product. So that meant we were very well set up to scale. We just hadn't really scaled yet.
Yeah.
So that's when we started building on those elements, and we're much stronger in them now. And I think, like, although we paid the price for not growing as fast as we could have, it put us in a really strong position for the future. And I'm talking about the agency here.
Yeah.
Because all those systems are set up and humming smoothly. It's not like we just added a whole bunch of projects to systems that were failing everywhere.
Yeah.
And that will make things a lot easier in the long term.
100%. Yeah. No, that's very, very interesting. I like that a lot. And I think, and I think that's where most SEO businesses are, right? Because again, as you said, like most SEO businesses, they are in this space where, you know, they're really good at doing SEO. They're really good at the execution part, but it's this part with actually getting clients on a consistent basis and so on. That is the challenge for the majority of them, right?
Yeah. I mean, you hear different stories when you have clients coming to us that have had terrible experiences with other agencies, but you never hear both sides of that. But
correct.
I think there's a mixture of businesses out there that are delivering good products and other ones that are not delivering much at all in our space.
That is very valid feedback as well, though, right? Because like the SEO industry generally have a horrible reputation. And
yes,
it's not necessarily as much because of a lack of delivery, but actually the biggest thing is a lack of good communication. So where most, and again, it comes back to the sort of personality of most SEOs, right? But where most of these businesses really struggle is actually the ability to effectively communicate both expectations and results and so on. Because the problem is, people feel they have a shit experience if they're not being communicated to in a good manner, right? So very often client leaves, not necessarily because they aren't getting results, but because they either feel that they're not being taken serious, they feel systems are not working, they feel they're not being communicated too well. And like a lot of SEO companies really fall into that trap. And they're like, well, why did the customer leave? You know, we were doing great. We were giving them great results. But a lot of the time, it comes down to very poor communication.
Yeah, that's a really great insight, actually. I mean, that does happen. I was speaking to a friend who runs an agency the other day who was saying, this client is leaving. We took their traffic from nothing to like all page one, have grown the traffic 1,000%. Why are they doing this to us? And he took it very personally.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer, but it's possible that was it.
Yeah, but and it's really, really, really common in the industry, right? And it's such a shame. But it really, as you said, like a lot of it comes down to these SEOs. They don't like talking to people, right? They don't like talking to clients. And again, if you don't like doing it, you better find someone who does, who can do that, right? Because you are going to consistently have all this big churning clients and customer coming and going and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fun way to build a business.
It's really not. And it's the hardest way to build a business, because if you've got high churn, then there's so much more pressure on the front end sales area. It's much easier to keep a client than it is to get a new one, and a lot cheaper as well. Definitely. So it's funny, over the years, Kyle was always at me for trying to save clients, dropping whatever I was doing and just be like, let him go, man. screw them, like they can go somewhere else. We don't need them. And I was like, no, it's so important if we want to grow this business, even if we can just convince them to stay for another 3 months, you know, that's another $5,000 we wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
Definitely. Excellent, man. Listen, that have been amazing talking with you. And I'm very thankful you wanted to spend a little bit of time jumping on the podcast. Before we finish here, any particular sort of tips and tricks around management that you want to share with the audience?
One of the quotes that I like to try and live by as much as I can in management and just my business life is just generally, it's one from Zig Ziglar, and he says that the best way to get what you want is to help enough other people get what they want. Maybe you're familiar with it. And various other entrepreneurs have said, I think Warren Buffett has said something pretty similar as well when he's doing deals.
Yeah.
I think the founder of, but anyway, a lot of entrepreneurs and successful business people have said something similar over the years. And I think fundamentally, if you can try and be a little bit selfless at the expense of maybe not getting as much as you want out of every transaction, that actually comes back many times over through your career.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good reading materials on this point as well, right? But like a lot of the time, a good deal is not necessarily the good deal where you make the most money. The best deal is where everyone is happy, right? So if you have a client, even if they pay a little bit less, if it means that they're more happy and you're more happy and you keep them around for much longer, that might be the best opportunity, right? Like it's not always about, like I see it in the e-commerce world, for example, where, you know, people are always trying to squeeze these Chinese sellers, and instead of, you know, paying 70 cents for something, they pay 65 cents, and they're really trying to squeeze every cent out of it. But it hits them so much on the back end because, you know, that suddenly the factories start using like slightly less good materials, and, you know, suddenly the error rates on batches start increasing and stuff. And it's just, if you're pushing people into positions where, you know, they take your deal because they're desperate for the business, but they're not happy with the deal, you often actually end up doing yourself a disservice, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you can apply this to both supply end and demand end of Definitely. Any business, and you'll end up better off for it in the long run.
Definitely. Right, Andy. So if people are desperate in getting in touch with yourself after listening to this episode, what is the best ways to do so?
Well, as we've just launched the Internet Marketing Gold SEO community, it's at internetmarketing.gold is the website. You can come and join our community there, and I'm in there all the time. Or if you want to contact me via email, my email is andy@hvseo.co.
Awesome.
But I'd really encourage you to get involved. It's free to join.
Excellent. Free is good. Everyone likes free.
Absolutely.
Very good, Andy. Very good. Thank you very much for coming on today, and have a great time.
Thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.